Advanced Studio Classroom is on the air. "41 million children aged 5 and under are overweight or obese worldwide. Why? Stay tuned and find out more. Welcome, listeners, to day 3 of our newsworthy article, and I'm so proud that you joined us again for day 3 here at Advanced. Well done. Give yourself a round of applause. Well, we're happy that you came back, and I'm joined again by 2 great panelists who also came back. Who are they? I'll let them introduce themselves right now.
Hi, everyone. I'm Campbell, and this article I'm actually very interested in as a father, and I really do care about the health of my children, so it would be really great to see what it has to say.
Well, hi, everyone. It's Lois here, returning with you for our 3-day article. It's now July 13th, so we're having the hot summer weather, which may want us to grab some food that isn't the best for us, or beverages that aren't. And as a mom who has children in her 20s, I still am concerned about this because I think the baby boomers, which I'm one of, paved the way to a bad example of what children and teens should be eating and drinking. But I have to tell you, we honestly did not know in a lot of cases.
Right.
A lot has been revealed in the last decade.
Right.
Even the last half decade.
Right. Well, I mean, it's the same thing with smoking and alcohol, right? And people didn't know the results of those things till years later when those effects came into play.
Exactly. You know, it's interesting how there's things that all of us kind of mums and dads grabbed out of the cupboard or pantry and took on a trip or a bicycle ride with us, whatever. I'm thinking of some really, really mini crackers, and I will not give their name, that we always had. Sometimes we put peanut butter on them. Sometimes we didn't. We ate handfuls of them. And now they're telling you all the bad things about these small little crackers. I also think of juice boxes. You know, I always limited my kids, though, on those because I thought they were doing damage to the backside or underside of your teeth and maybe your gums. But a lot of parents had children just about living on juice boxes.
Right, yeah.
And a lot of them weren't juice. They were actually drink with a little bit of juice.
Right, yeah.
Yeah. Well, listeners, what are we talking about? We are going to be talking today about overweight children, and it is a growing problem in Africa and Asia. Now, often we've talked about this problem being in a lot of different Western countries, whether in America, Canada, New Zealand, Australia, England. But today we're talking about it's also growing in Africa and Asia. So, listeners, we invite you right now to turn to page 22 of your Advanced magazine, and let's begin today's reading on column 1, line 8.
Overweight children are a growing problem in Africa and Asia. Driven by the growing availability of fatty, sugary foods and beverages in low and middle-income countries, 41 million children aged 5 and under are overweight or obese, a number expected to grow to more than 70 million children worldwide during the next decade, a new World Health Organization WHO report says. Between 1990 and 2014, rates of young children who are overweight or obese have surged to 6.1% from 4.8%, says a WHO report. In lower middle-income countries, the number of overweight and obese children younger than 5 has doubled, from 7.5 million to 15.5 million kids. Almost half of those overweight children, 48%, lived in Asia in 2014, and 25% lived in Africa. The report has been 2 years in the making. The Commission called for a whole-of-government approach to improve children's diets and promote physical activity. In addition to promoting breastfeeding for infants and promulgating guidelines for healthful eating, governments should implement an effective tax on sugar-sweetened beverages to reduce their consumption by children and adolescents, the report says.
Well, thank you, Steve, for reading that for us today. And perhaps you're with the magazine in front of you, or even on your digital device, you have our Advanced Magazine, or our e-magazine, as we like to call it. Yes, we have moved to the digital world. So if you want to move from paper to digital, make sure you get the Advanced Magazine on your digital device and join us with our radio shows. Today, we're talking about overweight children and the growing problem in Africa and Asia. Now, as we begin today's article, we see that there is a push, or driven by the growing availability of fatty sugar foods and beverages in low and middle income countries. 41 million children aged 5 and under are overweight or obese. Now, we mentioned that at the top of the show. And so what is happening here, Lois?
Well, diets have changed. Demands have changed. What's available has changed. And also, there's things that are much more accessible than they used to be. And I blame a lot right now. What my observation is in Asia is drinks that are high-calorie drinks with such a huge amount of sugar in them.
Yeah.
Whether it be liquid sugar or granulated sugar.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. I think there's a misconception out there that when you eat that people who are obese or overweight are a result of eating fatty foods, right? And I mean, part of it is true, but for the most part, it's actually the sugar in our food that is actually causing people to gain weight. And like Lois was saying, there is just a plethora of availability right now of these processed foods, right? And so, I mean, recently I've been taking a lot of health classes, because I want to be healthy. I want my children to be healthy. And they're constantly telling us, when we eat, you should eat food, not food products, right? And the thing is that in today's society, food products, I mean, you just think about convenience stores, you think about grocery stores, food products are available everywhere, and they're very convenient.
Yes, exactly. So we're seeing the growing availability of fatty and sugary foods in low and middle income countries. So countries that did not have accessibility to these foods before, it has increased, and especially to children. And unfortunately, in the next sentence, we see that number is expected to grow, Lois. To how much?
Well, it says 41 million children aged 5 and under are overweight or obese, a number expected to grow to more than 70 million children worldwide during the next decade. I was hoping I was going to read 41 million dropping to 17 million.
Right.
And now I see that it's a huge increase. You got to realize 41 million to 70 million. If you're at 82 million, you've doubled it. So we're not far from doubling it.
Right.
And this is a worldwide problem. And also it says a new World Health Organization, or what we often refer to as a WHO, this report tells us this.
Right. Now, we see a little bit of history come into the next paragraph here because the World Health Organization has been around for quite a long time, and they have kept a lot of records over the last few decades. It says between 1990 and 2014, rates of young children who are overweight or obese have surged to 6.1% from 4.8%. When we say something has surged, Campbell, what are we talking about?
It means it's increased in volume, right? It's grown a lot bigger and very quickly. So from 4.8%, it's moved up to 6.8%, 6.1% pretty quickly.
Right. So already we've seen in that amount of time, just 14 years, that we've increased that much. Now we see that in lower middle income countries, the number of overweight and obese children younger than 5 now has what, Lois?
Has doubled from 7.5 million to 15.5 million kids. Now, I think as a parent and observing, what my kids were doing and what kids are doing now, my kids might have drank the amount of soda pop or soft drinks, whatever you want to call them, eaten maybe, the same amount of what we call junk food. But they were also much more active when they were growing up. Nowadays, we have children who sit so much or lay down or just recline. And so they're not burning up all those calories either, right?
Right.
And so that's a concern. It kind of goes hand in hand, too. You might be having a lot more, or it might be available to you now as well, and it wasn't before, but you also don't have movement in your children like you used to.
Yes. And we see that almost half of those overweight children, that's 48%, are living where, Campbell?
They live in Asia in 2014, and 25% lived in Africa.
Okay, so these statistics are quite troubling,
Right.
When we see that there's doubled in the children that are under 5, and then we also see that it's changing from country too. It's growing into different countries.
Right, and we have to realize in this example here, it means the whole continent of Asia and the whole continent of Africa. So we're talking about a lot of countries, huge land mass, and huge population.
Right. Well, we go on to see that this report has been 2 years in the making, and we have that as one of vocabulary focus words. It is an idiom. When something is in the making, it is taking an amount of time to make, or the amount of time it took to make. So this report took 2 years to make. And what do they go on to say should be happening, Campbell?
Well, the commission called for a whole-of-government approach. So there needs to be a change from the governmental level and not just on the, in the individual level.
Right. And I think there's a lot of perhaps parents, individual parents, that are trying to improve this within their own families, perhaps even schools. So a lot of educational involvement there, but they're wanting to see it come from the top down, aren't they?
Right.
So they want to see the government get in behind or support this to improve children's diets and promote what you were just talking about, Lois.
Right.
Physical activity.
Right. I take a lot of my examples and cues on this from Jamie Oliver, because he's really the one that started countries saying, take responsibility. Look what your people look like. What are you feeding them? What are they drinking? How active are they?
Right.
Are you trying to grow your own food if you have a patch of land? Things like that.
Right.
Who is Jamie Oliver, Lois?
Well, Jamie Oliver was first called the Naked Chef. Now that's because he was cooking food that didn't have any additives. It was fresh, naked food. You clean it off and you start using it. And so he is, I guess what we call a chef celebrity, but he also has a big corporation that encourages people to eat well, eat right, and he has amazing cookbooks, TV shows, restaurants, you name it.
Yeah, I mean, the thing is that it is a lot more convenient to eat unhealthy.
It is.
Right. In some ways, it's easier to go to McDonald's and order a hamburger and fries than to go to the supermarket, purchase fresh fruit and vegetables, go home and prepare it and cook it. Right. So the idea, and also a lot of times the food products are a lot cheaper than actually eating the healthy stuff.
Yes.
So that is why we find that in lower middle income countries, the rate of obesity ends up growing because the food is more of the bad stuff is more easily available.
Right, and that's what we said at the top of the program, that there is this growing availability, right? And so we're trying to figure out how to counter that, because this food is full of fat or full of sugar, or like you mentioned, Lois, additives as well, like chemicals that are not good for our body and do promote obesity and being overweight. Well, we see in addition to promoting, here are some of the ways that they're hoping to promote this improvements in children's diets through physical activity, and in addition to promoting breastfeeding for infants, they want to promulgate or promulgating. What is that word?
Interesting word. We don't use it often. It says to announce something publicly, especially a new law.
Right.
So often this will help happen with health. Okay, so that your own country's health system or health agency will announce things that they want to get their population to strive to do this or to fulfill this, so that in this case they'll have a healthier population.
Right. I think, for example, washing your hands is something that a lot of governments continue to promote or promulgate. Right? For example, you'll see the signs everywhere in classrooms, also in public places, to make sure people follow those guidelines.
Right. Soap and water and get them clean, right?
Yes. Yeah. And going back to the idea of breastfeeding, I do want to encourage people that as much as you can, breastfeeding is a great thing, and this hasn't always been promoted, but it's been, I feel like the past few years, breastfeeding has been more in the public eye, and it's been something that has been more promulgated or promoted. And it's true, breastfeeding is not just good for the infant, it's also great for the mother as well.
Yeah.
Good. And so we're wanting to promulgate guidelines for healthy eating. And therefore, they're saying, this is the WHO, the World Health Organization. They're hoping that governments will implement an effective tax on sugar-sweetened beverages.
Yes. Now, this is definitely a good thing. This is where the UK or England is leading the way, because they are getting this all set up. I believe it has passed already. And it's going to be increased tax dollars for the government, but it's also going to save them a lot of money in the long run, because it'll probably help the whole healthcare system as well.
Right.
Yeah. And I think about where we live in Asia, how sugary drinks are available on every corner, and a lot of times people think, well, I'm just going to get half sugar, right? But the thing is, the half sugar doesn't mean that it's half sugar. It just tastes like it's not as sweet, but it's actually probably just 3/4, it's just as much sugar.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, actually, we're talking about beverages. Beverages are drinks, and of course, there's sugar hidden in a lot of drinks. Many people think of soda or, pop or different things like that have sugar, but even orange juice is
milk, apparently. Yes, so there's a lot of things that we have to be concerned about. That's why my cup here, it's almost always just water.
Yeah. And I think it's just being knowledgeable about what is in that beverage. Make sure you know what's going on, so you know where there is sugar and how to cut it out of your diet. Well, we're seeing that they're hoping to reduce the consumption or use of children or by children and adolescents. So this is what the World Health Organization is hoping governments will do for their younger members of society. Well, let's go on to see and learn a little bit more.
The report notes that low-income families have the greatest risk of obesity and are most responsive to price changes. Fiscal policies may encourage this group of consumers to make healthier choices, provided healthier alternatives are made available, as well as providing an indirectly educational and public health signal to the whole population, the report says. The report comes at a time when sales of soft drinks across the world have skyrocketed. In countries such as India, Brazil, and China, such sales have more than quadrupled over the last decade or so. In 2012, soft drink sales were estimated at $532 billion. Meanwhile, sales of packaged and processed foods are also burgeoning in middle-income nations. The WHO report urges governments to coordinate their efforts so that marketing appeals for unhealthful foods and beverages do not cross borders, the Commission said.
Well, listeners, if you're joining us for the first time, day 3 here on a newsworthy article, we're talking about overweight children and the growing problem it's becoming in Africa and Asia. Now, we've been learning about a World Health Organization report that has given us statistics showing the growth of overweight and obese children throughout the areas of Africa and Asia. Now, as we begin this next paragraph, Lois, we learn what is happening with low-income families.
Well, it says in this report that it notes that low-income families have the greatest risk of obesity and are more responsive to price changes.
Right. So we did talk a little bit earlier about this, about how this food, this fatty, sugary food is more convenient. It's easier to come by. It's more available and perhaps even cheaper, Campbell. You mentioned that.
That's right. And also the other thing is it lasts longer, right? So we were talking about the different additives and preservatives that might be in there. So you can buy things in bulk. You can just store it and it won't go bad. And so these things are appealing to low-income families because it ends up being cheaper. You know, you can also have food that will last a long time, and yeah.
And it means changing your ways, changing your habits, we say. I know something for me. If I'm hungry coming in the door after a full day of work, it's often easier to grab something that is really right there prepared, right? But now I've got in the habit of going into my crisper, grabbing a carrot and peeling it really quick, and now I just eat the whole carrot. And that satisfies me. It's a lot healthier, and it's just a natural sugar in the carrot. I'm not having something that has had white sugar added to it.
Right. Well, we learned earlier that also the World Health Organization has suggested that there be a whole of government approach for different countries when they're trying to get their citizens to eat healthier. And we go on in this next paragraph. The report says fiscal policies may encourage this group of consumers to make healthier choices. And what do we mean when we say fiscal?
When we're talking about fiscal, we're talking about something that's connected with public money. So policies involving public money may encourage this group, the lower income families of consumers, to make healthier choices.
Our listeners will often hear fiscal responsibility for a government, right? Or the fiscal responsibility of your household. So you're taking care of your money, and it's important that you know this, and you want fiscal responsibilities and policies from your government.
Right. And in this case, we're talking about food and having healthier choices available.
Right.
So we see that it's also providing indirectly educational and public health signals for the whole population.
Right.
So not just for children, but for everybody.
Right. So in a way, it's making it more financially beneficial to eat healthy rather than to eat unhealthy.
Right. They need to counter the fact that it's cheaper right now to eat this kind of fatty, sugary food. Rather than if you buy healthier food or vegetables or fruit, they can often be more expensive.
Right. And I think it's also, I like to call it forecasting, looking down the road. So if a government sees, well, if my population eats this and drinks all this, I'm going to have an increase in diabetes or all kinds of other diseases.
Right.
But if I invest in the fact that fresh fruits and vegetables and non-prepared food is available to my citizens, and then I tax these fatty foods and terrible beverages for my citizens, in the end, I'm actually going to save money.
Right.
I'm going to save money on health care because you're taking care of your citizens.
Yeah, looking at the big picture and thinking about the future. Well, we see that this report comes at a time when what is happening with soft drink sales around the world, Campbell?
Well, sales of soft drinks across the world have skyrocketed. So, drinks like Coca-Cola, Pepsi, Sprite, things like that, that came into the market maybe 40, 50 years ago, and now they're available all over the world. And so the sales of these drinks have skyrocketed, which just means that they've risen at a very quick rate.
Right, especially in countries such as India, Brazil, and China. These sales have more than quadrupled over the last decade. When something is quadrupled, what has it done,
It's
Lois?
gone 4 times the size, increased 4 times. We also want to make sure our readers know, I realize we're talking about Africa and Asia. Here we have 2 Asian countries, India and China, but we have a South American country mentioned here in Brazil.
Wow. Now, we learned that in 2012, soft drink sales were estimated at $532 billion. I can't imagine what that is right now when we think that it's skyrocketed and quadrupled in that between 2012 and now. Now, we go on to see that, meanwhile, sales of packaged and processed food are also doing what, Campbell?
They're burgeoning in middle-income nations. So burgeoning means that they're growing and they're expanding.
Right, and we talked earlier about when something's packaged or processed to last longer, oftentimes there's a lot of chemicals or additives put in them.
And like Campbell has said before, oftentimes people want to go, I call it buying in mass. They want to go to a big grocery store or they want to go to a big, we call them box stores, and buy everything, and it can stay on their shelves a long time.
And let's be honest, it's easier to open up a can of spaghetti sauce than to get fresh vegetables and cook it and mash it and have to do it yourself, So packaged and processed foods, and like Lois is saying, it's a lot easier to just go and reach for a cracker, right, than to have to shave that carrot.
Yeah.
That's right. And so this is where the WHO report urges governments to coordinate their efforts so that the marketing appeals for unhealthy foods and beverages do not cross borders, do not move into other countries and affect other people. So there's a lot of information in this article, but hopefully we've learned we can eat healthier and help generations in the future as well to continue to eat healthier so that our children are not becoming overweight and obese. Well, listeners, we hope you learned a lot from today's article, and we hope that you join us next time here on Advanced Radio. Make sure you check out some of our features as well in the magazine through the QR code. We thank you for joining us today. This is Amanda,
Lois,
and Campbell
saying goodbye.
Bye.